This video will contain spoilers for all of Persona 5. You have been warned. Persona 5 is a game about many things. It is simultaneously a turn-based JRPG and a social/dating simulator. In one half of the game, you get to learn about your friends, grow closer to them, and learn how they tick as people. Look, Yusuke bought lobsters. How joyous. And in the other half, you get to beat up demons and unfathomable horrors from a nightmare reality where the guy who owns Twitter decides how the world should be run. Hold on. I'm getting a call? Read the news. Oh. I really wish I could awaken my persona right now. The story of Persona 5 is a relatively simple one, yet it fascinates me with the themes it is able to express. There are many different ones that this video could cover in specific. For example, self-actualization, the importance of camaraderie, and how free we are as individuals are all topics the game covers over and over again. While I may touch on some of those examples in this video, they are not what I want to focus on today. I would argue there is a theme that is just as important as the previously mentioned ones, yet it is not talked about by people online. You've seen the title and thumbnail, so you know I'm referring to anti-capitalism. Persona 5 directly critiques our modern capitalist system in ways that companies of Atlus's size are usually scared to touch. As the saying goes, don't bite the hand that feeds you. I would argue, though, that this socioeconomic angle makes Persona 5 stand out amongst other entries in the Persona series and even modern JRPGs. It creates a fascinating narrative framework that is ripe for exploration. That is what I am here to do today. I don't think there's a more natural place to start at than the beginning. This is Ren Amamiya, or as most people know him, Joker. What's relevant right now is that he has been falsely convicted of a crime, and thus has lost all of the agency within his life. He had to switch schools, live under protection of a legal guardian that didn't seem too happy to do so, and was confined to an attic at night. For all intents and purposes, Joker has become an outcast to society. He's seen as undesirable, somebody without much worth specifically because of his criminal past. This doesn't stop Ryuji from forming a connection with Joker, however. Both of them bond over the fact that they're societal outcasts. Ryuji can be described as many things, a lot of which can be described in terms of things that he is lacking. He's impatient, not exactly a stellar student, and can be quite socially clueless. That is why most people don't seem to have an interest in Ryuji. To say that is all he is would be purposefully shallow, however. He is someone who is courageous, somebody who values justice, and someone who cares for his friends on a deep level. Ryuji is a wonderful person who hasn't been given the opportunity to escape the box he was placed in. He comes from a broken household and didn't exactly have money to invest in his education. The one thing he was stellar at, track and field, was taken away from him by an outside force. Somebody broke his leg, forcing him to rest from the sport, needing to recover for almost a full year. He was not given an opportunity to succeed, and any that he did have were ripped away from him. After interloping in the metaverse for a bit, Joker and Ryuji run into the third member of their ragtag crew, Morgana. Morgana is a little bit of a different case, as he is not exactly a human, but his struggles are still human in nature. There is a want for him to be something important, something more, something useful. Throughout most of Persona 5, Morgana's greatest desire is to figure out how to become human because humans have the ability to decide their fate. From Morgana's perspective, they have greater free will than he could ever have. There is an inherent sense of morality inside him that he has to act on. The guy goes crazy whenever he sees the treasure of a palace, unable to compose himself. These treasures are manifestations of distorted desires, corrupting the minds of their bearer and hurting people around them because of it. Like Joker and Ryuji, he's an outcast from the system. Though, Morgana is more literally an outcast because he is not a human. Rounding out the party is An Takamaki. She's a half-American fashion model now living in Tokyo. You'd think that would make her a shoo-in for popularity and connection to people, but that's not the case. An is somebody who values the heart of her friends. Her morality revolves around the fact that she would do anything to help the people who she sees as her friends. That is why she ultimately puts her life at risk as a phantom thief, even though doing so is incredibly dangerous. This mindset of hers is what ultimately causes her to be a social outcast, as someone offers to sacrifice her body so Shiho Suzuki can stay on the school's volleyball team. When An becomes deeply uncomfortable with the position she is stuck in, the previously mentioned third person spreads rumors to the student body. Overnight, her reputation is destroyed, going from a mildly popular girl to a laughingstock. She's a victim of lies that sprout into sexist jabs and remarks. She ended up a social outcast through no fault of her own. For those of you who are familiar with Persona 5, you might have noticed a glaring pervert-shaped hole in my recounting of Joker, Ryuji, Morgana, and An's stories. I forgot to mention one particular individual, Suguru Kamoshida, the school's volleyball coach. The absence was intentional, as I wanted to talk about Kamoshida after establishing the position the original Phantom Thieves were placed in. This is because Kamoshida is the direct reason these characters have become outcasts. Joker and Morgana are a slight exception to this, but his actions still impact them. Kamoshida was the one that leaked the rumor of Joker having a criminal past. Kamoshida was the one that broke Ryuji's leg, forcing him to quit track and field. Kamoshida was the one that locked Morgana in his dungeon. Kamoshida was the one sexually advancing onto An, blackmailing her with Shiho's position on the volleyball team, and spreading lies that they slept together. How the hell is a stupid volleyball coach able to do this much nasty stuff and get away with it unscathed? One word: money. Shujin Academy profits massively from the fact that Kamoshida can do whatever he wants. The volleyball team is the Academy's claim to fame. Students get into good colleges solely on the fact that they are part of this team, the team that Kamoshida has full reign over. Why would the parents or the school speak up about this toxic behavior? The children get into a better university, and the school gets to massively profit from that reputation. It's an equal transaction in the eyes of the adults. The currency for that transaction, however, is the students themselves. This is Persona 5's first major critique of capitalism. In the interaction between Kamoshida, the parents, and Shujin, the people with power are the ones deciding the interests of the people without power. Working directly with the school staff or participating in the volleyball team are the only way a student can realistically succeed at Shujin. And for the volleyball team, that means you have to be exploited by Kamoshida for his own pleasure. We get a look at Kamoshida's psyche thanks to his palace, and the way he views the students is bleak to say the least. They are all seen as his servants, prisoners, or slaves. They are tools for him to use and abuse at his own pleasure. In his own mind, he is a gracious king, giving peasants the opportunity to succeed within the system that he himself constructed. But in reality, he is a mad tyrant who promises success, but never gives it to those in the lower rung of the system. We see a similar system manifest itself in the real world too. Bosses expect us to do anything for the company if it means greater profitability for them. Long work hours? Sure. Poor working conditions? You bet. Putting up with horrible people if it means success? Definitely. In a capitalist system, there's a transactional relationship between shareholders and companies where profitability needs to be maximized, often irregardless of how those ends are met. Let me just throw out a random example. There's this idea that women are unable to succeed in the workplace without the help of men. If you've ever heard the phrase, "she slept her way to the top," then you know what I'm referring to. Many people genuinely believe that women could never get to where they are because of merit, but only because of their bodies. Members of management could then exploit this sexist worldview in female employees who are desperate to find success. Does this situation sound familiar? It should, because it is the exact situation I described between An and Kamoshida. He is holding Shiho's spot on the volleyball team over her head for sex. While she doesn't go through with it, it very realistically could have happened if Joker didn't step in to help give her an out. Kamoshida was willing to go to some horrible lengths to get what he wanted, and the Phantom Thieves being a support network is what helped An protect herself from his wrath. All of the palaces and party members have their stories connected back to a critique of late-stage capitalism in some way, and I will be exploring them as they come. There's one other thing I wanted to touch on before moving on to the next section of Persona 5, What do the Phantom Thieves represent in this metaphor? Well, I'm of the belief that they're social revolutionaries. They want to change the system to one that prevents people from being put in the same situation as the Phantom Thieves are in. It's all about stopping the oppression of the underclass. You obviously have your party members to help you out, but they're not the only ones with skin in this game. As Joker builds confidants with people in wider society, he helps solve their problems while making the Phantom Thieves stronger. While the cutscenes with Sai are a little silly as you unlock each one, she is correct in discerning that Joker needs help from non-combatants to succeed in taking down the oppressive forces in the world. In the same way a country can't all be soldiers, the Phantom Thieves need strategists, weapon suppliers, governmental support, the media, and everyday citizens who are struggling to be on their side. Joker builds class consciousness by reaching out and deepening relationships with people. Only a united effort can rally the people behind you. Before talking about Yusuke's story, I have a request. If you've enjoyed what you've seen so far, then please consider subscribing. My goal is to put out videos in this style on a whole bunch of RPG related topics, so if you're passionate about stuff like Persona, then my community would be a great place for you. I recently hit 6,000 subscribers, so you have an opportunity to be part of my first 10,000 subscribers. With that quick plug out of the way, let's discuss the next chapter of Persona 5's story. The next character the Phantom Thieves target is Ichiryusei Madarame, a very popular artist known for his ability to draw in many different styles. They go into his palace, and surprise surprise, Madarame is actually an art thief. Each of the portraits in his museum are of pupils he's stolen from. Included amongst the list is the next party member to join the Phantom Thieves, Yusuke Kitagawa. Yusuke has always been a bit of an outcast. He has weird mannerisms of speaking, doesn't exactly have the same interests as other people, and he isn't really able to read social cues well. He also doesn't have a place of safety to return to, as his mother died when he was very young. Despite all that, he is incredibly talented at art. Yusuke ended up growing up in Madarame's household. For all intents and purposes, Madarame was Yusuke's father. Growing up in an environment surrounded by expectations and exploitation likely isolated the young boy even further. Yusuke was stuck as a victim of the system for so long that he was in denial about it. It was appalling and offensive to hear that the man who single-handedly raised him was exploiting him. He couldn't run from the truth, however, after Shadow Madarame shattered his whole reality. Madarame justifies his thievery of his pupils' artwork by saying that they would be forgotten and worthless without his help. Essentially, he's saying that he is an important part of the creation process for his students, and without him, their work is meaningless. A similar point pops up in Marxist theory on the relationship between laborers and capitalists. I think it's important to define those two terms real quick. Laborers are defined as people who produce goods. Think about it like this. A farmer grows and harvests crops. A factory worker assembles and packs machine parts. A painter creates and sells paintings. Capitalists are defined as people who own the means to produce said goods. If you've ever heard the phrase means of production, this is what that's referring to. Think of the landlord who owns the farmer's land, the CEO who owns the factory worker's factory, or the owner of the studio the artist paints in. Now, Madarame is not a literal capitalist, as he does not directly own the piece of land his art studio is on. He does, however, fill the role of metaphorical capitalist. By working with Madarame, he pressures his laborers, or students in this case, to provide their labor, or paintings, using his means of production. He does not directly produce anything of value when it comes to the painting process aside from the space, which he already owns. He takes most of the profit from his pupils' labor and passes it off as his own work. In a similar vein to this, when talking about Amazon, the news does not refer to the company by the many workers that actually put the labor in, but Jeff Bezos, the guy who skims the profit off of all his workers. Madarame also believes that his pupils must sacrifice everything about their lives to their teacher, in a similar way to how many companies expect you to dedicate yourself to work, lest you be deemed as lazy. The big plot twister on Madarame is the fact that he was the one who let Yusuke's mom die. She was one of his pupils, painting Sayuri, a piece of artwork that mystified the art world with its meaning. When she needed an ambulance, Madarame chose not to go and get help because of how valuable Sayuri would be. This follows the previously established metaphor very closely, as Yusuke's mother worked herself to death for a man that wouldn't bother saving her. After dealing with Madarame, the Phantom Thieves cross paths with an unlikely recruit, Makoto Nijima was tasked with figuring out who the Phantom Thieves were, as it's evident that they attend Shujin Academy. Being the class president, she had no choice but to follow through on these plans. It wasn't hard for her to figure out who the Phantom Thieves were, partially because she's sharp, and partially because Ryuji doesn't shut up. She's also not somebody you'd expect to fall in with the Phantom Thieves crowd, as she does largely benefit from the systems in place as a member of importance within it. That is, until she becomes disillusioned with Shujin's authority. What kicks the third palace off is a problem that Makoto had been observing. Students were suddenly getting racked with a lot of debt after taking a mysterious, easy job. Not wanting her student body to be in danger, she appeals to the powers that she thought upheld order at the school, the principal. The principal is way too interested in catching the Phantom Thieves, however, as there's no reason for him to particularly care about the random students being suddenly threatened. The Phantom Thieves directly impact the reputation of the school, after all, so getting them under wraps as soon as possible will prevent any more bad PR from coming out. This ultimately frustrates Makoto, as she wants to help change the world for the better and achieve justice. However, the current system does not stand to benefit from upholding justice, so she ultimately feels useless. A little blackmail happens, and Joker is at to stop Junya Kaneshiro, a mob boss in the Tokyo area. As the game progresses, the anti-capitalist critiques become a little more blatant. Case in point, the Bank of Gluttony. As an individual, Kaneshiro is dedicated to doing anything for money. By anything, I mean anything. This, of course, manifests with roping high schoolers into debt and extorting them for cash. He wanted to do this so he never had to experience poverty again. Being crushed by the system dissolved any and all morals, leaving somebody who would do anything to be at the top of the hierarchy. This is why his palace isn't just a bank, but also a flying saucer. He wants to be at the top of Tokyo, above all of the other peasants who have to work for a living. Kaneshiro is perhaps the most explicit critique of capitalism in this entire game. A regular man who was in a bad position only succeeded under capitalism through sacrificing all of his morals. I don't think I need to elaborate any further on my point. That covers it pretty well. Following the takedown of Kaneshiro, the Phantom Thieves get a major boost in popularity. This results in a hacker group called Medjed threatening to trash the Japanese economy if Joker and his friends don't reveal themselves. To do this, they need the help of somebody with technical knowledge. This is where the next palace and the next party member come in with Futaba Sakura. She is a teenage girl who's extremely socially isolated, a hikikomori basically. She does this because of a trauma related to her mother, basically blaming herself for her mother's death. The Phantom Thieves are able to help her overcome her trauma, and like Yusuke, find a home amongst the gang of misfits. Now, you might be wondering where the anti-capitalist critiques come in with Futaba, seeing as her palace focuses much more on interpersonal drama. Well, it manifests in a few ways. Why exactly does Futaba think she killed her mother? She acknowledges that she isn't directly responsible, instead believing that her mother took her own life due to the stress of balancing work and a child that needed attention. Wakaba dedicated a lot of time to her job, often neglecting Futaba in the process. She internalized that as her being the cause of her mother's death, and not her work that killed her. Think about that. Futaba hates herself because she believes she pulled her mother away from her job. The metaphor is as clear as day here. Capitalism tears apart families. Wakaba's job tore her family apart not just metaphorically, but literally. She was forced to abandon her daughter for her job, the same job that ended up getting her killed. Wakaba learned something so valuable that powerful business people needed that information for profit. That, of course, was the existence of the metaverse. Upon stopping Medjed, the Phantom Thieves become overnight celebrities. Their protection of the average citizen is seen as something to be respected, but also a source of profit. Phantom Thief copycat merchandise starts springing up in stores all across Japan, showing how they've made a name for themselves. Almost instantly, many of the thieves start showing an interest in shilling out for profitability. This newfound popularity really gets to the head of Ryuji, who feels like women might actually be interested in him if he came out and admitted he was a Phantom Thief. A fight even ensues between him and Morgana about what the Phantom Thieves are supposed to stand for. Honestly, I don't blame them for thinking this way. Most of these teenagers come from poor households with missing family members. The Phantom Thieves could be their big break in the current system instead of attempting to change the current system for everyone. This rings to me as a critique of selling out one's own beliefs. The Phantom Thieves have a lot to gain by selling out. They haven't exactly done anything illegal, only really uprooting corruption by circumventing the police. They could very easily go public with their existence, get a massive influx of cash from merchandise sales, and get cushy government jobs with the police force. Many social revolutionaries, especially in the online era, do mellow out their beliefs when they want to get into mainstream politics. It is more profitable to cast as wide a net as possible, and if you happen to hold beliefs that challenge the status quo, there's a good chance you could lose profitability from advertisers. After beating Kaneshiro, he actually tries to persuade the Phantom Thieves into selling out, saying that the metaverse is highly profitable for people who can cross into it. The Phantom Thieves, not sure where to go after stopping Medjed, opted to ask their website for who they should target next. Most people wanted to see Kunikazu Okumura taken down, which is notable for a few reasons. Firstly, the Phantom Thieves targeted someone who wasn't really threatening them directly. Secondly, Okumura was a really obvious target, but not somebody who was an immediate threat. Sure, Okumura Foods really only cared about profitability, often overworking their employees, but that isn't really a unique evil. It is obviously bad that Okumura exploits his workers, but the blame doesn't fall entirely on his shoulders. Kamoshida was the head of an abuse scandal, Madarame was the head of a plagiarism scandal, Kaneshiro was the head of a dangerous mafia, Medjed was threatening to harm all of Japan for blackmail. What actual threat did Okumura actually pose to society? Being a crappy boss? Laws could have realistically been written to stop his behavior. However, they would have never been created under the current system. Sooner or later, the Phantom Thieves would realize that targeting individual actors is not how societal reform comes about, and they would start gunning for lawmakers and lobbyists who actually hold enough power to cause a change. Okumura is more so a commentary about what he isn't rather than what he is. Sure, he has power, but the sphere of influence he wields is relatively contained. He's a symptom, not a root cause. There's a character I've failed to mention thus far who is pretty important for this chapter of the game. Haru Okumura. I haven't mentioned Haru up until now because, well, the game doesn't particularly care about Haru. I put her on my party to destroy things with gun skills, but she's probably the character with the least going on. Haru was a relatively popular and influential person who joins with the Phantom Thieves after making friends with Morgana. She was pushed to rebel by being forced to marry a man she hates, which eventually stirs the necessity to resolve Okumura's palace. She's not exactly an outcast, nor is she particularly disillusioned with the system. Hell, in her confidant, she inherits all of the assets of her father's company and acts as the CEO. I don't think anything even changes at the Big Bang Burger restaurants. The one thing Haru does represent is the idea of intersectionality. Even though she benefits from the current system massively, she is still a victim of oppression in other forms, mainly because of her gender. Many of her executives don't see her as competent, and her father mainly saw her as a pawn to gain actual political power. So, even though she still stands to lose a lot if the Phantom Thieves enact the change they want to see, she would still be part of a society that makes it more fair for everyone. That's why she joins up with Joker. After falling for the most obvious setup of all time, someone kills Okumura to frame the Phantom Thieves as his murderers. The public instantly turns on them as the government begins an intensive search for the culprits. They've been framed for violence by the government, who doesn't want to upset the system. This is a tactic seen throughout history to try and justify action against social revolutionaries. It's not always as explicit as framing a murder on a group. Oftentimes, riots and property damage are excuses for government pushback, even if the majority of demonstrations are peaceful. Framing the situation a certain way helps justify it in the minds of the people. We see this directly. After being framed, the Phantom Thieves' popularity careens downwards. Since they have to be in hiding, they can't make a case for themselves. This results in them making a deal with the pancake demon, Goro Akechi. Turns out, Akechi is also a metaverse interloper, supposedly discovering his powers around the time of Okumura's palace. He strikes a deal with the thieves, destroys Sainijima's palace to stop the Phantom Thieves investigation, but quit being the Phantom Thieves. They're backed into a corner and don't really have a choice otherwise, so they have their next target, Sainijima. Sai is a high-ranking government official, conducting different police investigations and interrogations. Her palace is a casino, a physical representation of her current outlook towards the law. Sai is envious of her co-workers for getting promoted to different high-ranking positions over herself. She believes they're not as qualified as her, but that their number of convictions are just higher. That's what she means when she says the law is a casino. People can be innocent or guilty, and in the case of Sai, the only outcome that matters is winning, or getting more convictions. This is a very cut and dry case of capitalism interfering with the government, causing corruption. While we don't see it directly, Goro Akechi mentions that Sai has been blackmailing people and forging evidence to boost her conviction rate. She wants that higher ranked position with better pay and more power for no other reason than for her own success. She is stepping on the heads of the lowest rung of society to get ahead. It's not like the Nijimas are struggling or anything. Sai is good at her job and gets a good paycheck, but because she's not rising up the hierarchy like she wanted, she's using any methods available to do so. To emulate this behavior, in her palace, every single one of her games is rigged on the back end. The Phantom Thieves need to uncover the cheating and rig it in their favor for any progress to be made. While her desires are distorted, the law is nothing more than a game she needs to win. Before we get into real endgame territory, we need to discuss Goro Akechi. Akechi has the power to enter the metaverse like the Phantom Thieves can. He's actually had this power for a long while, even before Joker was able to do so. So, what was he doing that whole time? Murder. Cold-blooded murder. Akechi had the unique power to take someone out without even being noticed thanks to the metaverse. As such, he decided to use his abilities as an arm for the oppressive system instead of working to fight it. Akechi had the potential to be like Joker, to build confidence with people and create actual long-lasting connections in order to see change in the world, but he didn't. He sold out the people in his social class so he could move up the hierarchy. Akechi was a child out of wedlock, abandoned by his father and forced to grow up an orphan due to his mother's passing. A furious rage built inside of him, isolating himself from everyone else. In the modern Persona games, each of the main characters is assigned a major tarot arcana, with their traits often reflecting the character's story in some way. A very obvious example of this is Ryuji, who is the Chariot. He's a headstrong person who keeps pushing forward, even in the toughest of circumstances. That is something that the Chariot represents. Akechi is the Justice arcana. He is somebody who claims to stand for justice, whether that be fighting for Joker's cause or to solve crimes with the police, but that is merely his facade. Akechi's form of justice is that of revenge. Revenge against the people who caused his suffering. Revenge against the people who destroyed his family. Revenge against the man who he feels ruined his life, not against the system. The rise of authoritarianism is a topic you probably didn't expect to be covered in this video. Persona 5 is not afraid to push the ball in that regard, so I don't need to hold myself back either. Let's talk about Masayoshi Shido. He is a businessman turned politician who ran for Japan's parliament off the back of the Phantom Thieves panic, using populism as his main rhetorical argument to sway voters to his side. Of course, Shido does not actually believe in what he says about making the country a better place. He wants to run the country into the ground for anyone that isn't part of his secret billionaire club. To come full circle, Shido was also the one who accused Joker of a crime at the beginning of the game simply for standing up to him. He was the one who nearly took away Joker's future. His awful behavior led to many of the party members' lives being severely impacted. Now, I know the introduction to the game said that depictions of people in the game are merely coincidental, but a lot of these traits sound very similar to a certain person who keeps rearing his ugly head. Sorry, I'm only playing around a bit. It just so happens that a lot of these traits are super common on authoritarians who pop up like a hydra out of a weak liberal government. I believe this is what all of the critiques of capitalism mount to. Throughout the whole game, there's this snowballing idea in the background about an uncaring and inattentive power structure. With Kamoshida, the school board was complacent. With Madarame, the art world was complacent. With Kaneshiro, the school board was complacent. With Medjed, the government was complacent. With Okumura, the government was complacent. With Sai, the government was complacent. With Shido, the government was complacent. The systems in power meant to block these bad actors did not do their job for a variety of specific reasons, but they all boiled down to one thing: money. Shido is the manifestation of that idea, distilled into its most hyperbolic form. He's the result of liberal incompetence in the face of a growing right-wing authoritarian movement. When the government leaves people to suffer so they can line their pockets, the people rally around the first thing that gives them an actual reason to stand for something. Shido weaponized the manufactured violence of the Phantom Thieves to rise to power, and the systems in place did nothing but let it happen. It ends up being the social revolutionaries who stopped Shido, and put an end to his authoritarian rise. So, we stopped Shido. We put on a massive display in the middle of Tokyo. We took a stand for what we believed in. Did the world change? Well, no. Almost nothing has changed outside of Shido's arrest. The powers that be instantly do a cleanup job on the whole Phantom Thief situation, claiming it as nothing more than a hoax. And look at that. Nothing about the liberal government has changed. It's almost as though there's some force preventing them from adopting any real change. There's only one place left to go, and that's the bottom of Mementos, as the big door in the basement has finally opened up. Inside is a twisting labyrinth of human misery and complacency. People are stuck in cages. Many people are capable of leaving if they tried, but are unwilling to and unmoving. At the bottom of Mementos lies a powerful creature, its strength gained by suckling the misery of others. And yet, the people it harvests from dare not consider abandoning it. It is capitalism. I mean Yaldabaoth. Yaldabaoth is the self-proclaimed god of control. He is the propagator of the metaverse in its current state, a creature that sees humanity as helpless without his direction. Now, this might be a little bit of a stretch, but I believe that Yaldabaoth is a metaphorical manifestation of capitalism. Why do I think this? Well, the first reason is through his appearance. He's an angelic monstrosity, a fusion between metallic machine parts and a biblically accurate angel. The design is meant to invoke the biblical as a commentary on how our society worships capitalism. Profitability is always something that has to be taken into account, regardless of if it will alleviate suffering. Yaldabaoth claims he knows what is best for humanity, just as many people believe that following capitalistic ideas is what will lead to the betterment of humanity. The robotic elements are also meant to invoke feelings of industry. He's a mechanical giant, entirely man-made, yet claims to be a god. There are many angels in Persona 5, always taking their appearance from biblical interpretations, and none of them are robotic. He clearly stands separate from the likes of Gabriel, Uriel, and Michael, as a monster of its own. Speaking of his godhood, what does Yaldabaoth do when set free from Mementos? Well, he begins the rapture, starting to collapse the entire world. Almost everyone is none the wiser to the horrors going on around them, seeing this all as normal life. Sure, everything is falling apart, the climate is heating up beyond our control, we are destroying resources at an alarming rate, but that's just part of living in a modern society. Who cares if it consumes and destroys a few 100,000 million people? All that matters is that we worship him. Another point in favor of this reading is the attacks that Yaldabaoth uses. They are the obvious light attacks that a godly figure such as himself would use, but interestingly, he uses a variety of attacks that cause the sins of the palaces: lust, vanity, gluttony, wrath, greed, envy, and pride. Yaldabaoth is able to weaponize them against you. Like, the metaphor is so obvious. Yaldabaoth, the man-made false god, weaponizes your vices against you. It's literally saying companies are incentivized to be profitable through any means necessary, even if it means playing on carnal and harmful desires. I think that's all my bases covered for the base Persona 5. While I would like to explore the new Royal content, and especially the third semester, they don't offer all too much in terms of this anti-capitalism metaphor. Royal has its own unique voice, covering the topics of morality and free will that the base game doesn't touch on all too much outside of brief moments. Heck, maybe it deserves its own video. The postgame is rich enough to talk about it in detail, what it all means, and how Maruki's story is special. But it just doesn't really fit in here. If you want to see me cover the third semester in the future, please let me know in the comments down below. Thank you all for watching this video. It took a lot longer to cover everything I wanted to talk about than I originally expected, so I apologize for the delay. But this is another project checked off my list. If you want more stuff like this, please hit the subscribe button, like the video, and stay notified by hitting the bell. Thank you to my channel members SimNess and DawnTheSylv. They get early access to my videos, as well as exclusive channel emotes. Their support means the world to me and helps keep me going. I've been Luxy, and I'll see you next time.